Local boards are primarily responsible and accountable to the Texas Workforce Commission for the management and administration of grant funds allocated to the local area. However, the chief elected officials are liable to the state for any misuse of the grant funds. To help administer funds, the chief elected officials and the board must designate in the partnership agreement a fiscal agent to receive and be accountable for all contracted funds. The fiscal agent, often the board itself, shall be liable to the board and the CEOs for any misuse of funds. Such a designation does not release the local board or the CEOs from the liability for misused grant funds. The local workforce boards are accountable for proper management of workforce funds received on behalf of the workforce areas. The state is ultimately responsible for all workforce funds received on behalf of the workforce areas. In the event that TWC determines funds are expended in an inappropriate manner and are deemed disallowed, the disallowed costs are the liability of the local workforce board, even if a board subcontractor made the improper expenditure. Chapter 6 of the Texas Workforce Commission's Financial Manual for Grants and Contracts covers standard cost principles and allowable costs. Allowable costs must meet the general criteria of being necessary and reasonable, as detailed in Chapter 6. Examples of allowable costs include, but are not limited to, advertising costs may only be used for the recruitment of board staff, the procurement of goods and services, the disposal of surplus materials, or the outreach and recruitment of participants. Audit costs. Allowability is determined by federal audit requirements, and the costs of audits that are not conducted in accordance with such requirements are not allowable. Local board audits shall be performed annually and must be submitted to TWC no later than 9 months after the fiscal year end date. Meetings and conferences. Costs associated with conducting meetings and conferences are allowable if they meet the general criteria of allowable costs. Training and education. Costs of training and education for eligible individuals are allowable, subject to certain limitations detailed in Chapter 6. Unless specifically allowed by your contract with TWC, the following costs are not allowable and may not be paid with TWC program funds. Exclusion from this list is not an indication or implication of allowability. Bad debts, pension plan costs, contingency provisions, contributions, donations, entertainment costs including food and beverage, fines and penalties, interest costs, investment costs, losses on other awards or grants, lobbying, politics and campaigning, organization furnished automobiles for personal use, other disallowed costs. The board should contractually hold a subcontractor liable for any disallowed costs that are a result of a subcontractor's actions or lack thereof. Repayment of disallowed costs must be from local funds. As the steward of the workforce funds allocated to the workforce area, the board is fundamentally, as well as contractually, responsible for ensuring such resources are efficiently and effectively used to achieve the intended results. Each board has a responsibility, which originates from the State General Appropriations Act, to manage the funds it receives. A board must submit an itemized budget covering the operation of that fiscal year to TWC. These budgets include detailed estimated expenditures and revenue data. The boards, consistent with their strategic plan, oversight, and evaluation, use competitive procurements to select providers to deliver workforce employment and training services. Services are funded through different state and federal resources, and that funding comes with rules regarding expenditure and performance expectations. Boards must ensure that contractors comply with all applicable rules regarding funding and service provision, and that they meet performance standards. Funding is tied to performance targets set by the federal government and the Texas legislature in the General Appropriations Act. Thank you for investing your time in listening to this podcast.